Karite Haila Sabakaramana Swatantra Haya Sabe Nashabe Bhuvana Audhatya Karite Haila Sabakaramana Swatantra Haya Sabe Nashabe Bhuvana
Audhatya Karite Haila Sabakaramana Swatantra Haya Sabe Nashabe Bhuvana
Swatantra Haya Shabe Nashabe Bhuvana
Audhatya Karite Haila Sabakaramana Swatantra Haya Sabe Nashabe Bhuvana
Mataji's.
Audhatya Karite Haila Sabakaramana Swatantra Haya Sabe Nashabe Bhuvana Audhatya Karite Haila Sabakaramana Swatantra Haya Sabe Nashabe Bhuvana Audhatya Karite Haila Sabakaramana Swatantra Haya Sabe Nashabe Bhuvana
Audhatya impudence Karite to do Haila was Sabakara of all of you Mana the mind Swatantra independent Haya becoming Sabe all of you Nashabe will spoil Bhuvana the whole world. Okay. So let me just mention before I read the translation that what's happened here is that up to this point, that this is now happening, this is going on in Jagannath Puri, and all the devotees who had come to be with Lord Chaitanya during the Rath Yatra, but even more specifically during the rainy season, they all gathered together and started chanting the glories of, or the names even, or actually the transcendental qualities and names of Lord Chaitanya. Yes. And Lord Chaitanya has become apparently angry what are you all doing? Okay, so here's the translation. Thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chastised all the devotees, telling them not to show impudence and spoil the entire world by becoming independent. Let me just read the previous verse also. Shuni bhakta gane kahe sakroda vachane Krishna nama guna chadi kikara kirtane. Not liking the chanting of his transcendental qualities, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chastised them as if he were angry. What kind of chanting is this, he asked. Are you leaving aside the chanting of the holy name of the Lord? And this verse now. Thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chastised all the devotees, telling them not to show impudence and spoil the entire world by becoming independent. And this is not just the devotees, but this is the devotees headed by Srivas Thakur, whose very special transcendental personality, member of the Panchatattva, and extremely close and somewhat older, like senior in that sense, associate of Lord Chaitanya, purported by Srila Prabhupada. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu warned all his followers not to become independent or impudent. Unfortunately, after the disappearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, many Apasampradayas, so-called followers, invented many ways not approved by the Acharyas. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has described them as the Aula, Baula, Kartabhaja, Neda, Dharavesha, Sani Sahajiya, Saki Beki, Smarta, Jata Gosani, Ativadi, Chudadhari, and Gauranga Nagari. The Aula Sampradaya, Baula Sampradaya, and others invented their own ways of understanding Lord Chaitanya's philosophy without following in the footsteps of the Acharyas. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself indicates herein that all such attempts would simply spoil the spirit of his cult. And note that Prabhupada's using this term cult. Maybe it's in a slightly sort of facetious way, a little cheeky, but maybe also because even though the word cult is popularly understood amongst many people nowadays to mean some sort of, just some sort of deviant group of pseudo-religionists, something along those lines. But actually, the real understanding of the term is not like that. Cult, culture, yes, it just means a group of people. The Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is a sampradaya, some authorized line, strictly following the teachings and teaching the teachings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in a particular way. Not that all sampradayas are exactly equal. There can be different flavors, but there's nothing wrong necessarily with different flavors. Like here we have the devotees. What are they doing? Oh, those are green beans. Look at that. Green beans This is the green bean sampradaya. And this is the broccoli sampradaya. And Doc over there's, she's a member of the green bean sampradaya also. So they're slightly different lines, but they're just different flavors. You know, we're not going to just live on broccoli alone. Green beans are also nice. Okay, so there can be slightly different flavors because in the spiritual world, first of all you've got Goloka Vrindavan, Lord Krishna, in Vrindavan with Srimati Radharani and the gopis and Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda and so on and so forth. And there's a particular flavor there in a very broad sense. And then you've got Vaikuntha. We were last night referring to Lord Ram. He is not living in Goloka Vrindavan. He is living in Vaikuntha, in the part of Vaikuntha called Ayodhya. And there's a particular flavor. They are not as sort of, what would you say? Well, you could say kind of free and easy, informal. In Lord Ram's abode, Ayodhya, they're not so informal as the devotees are and as Krishna is in Goloka Vrindavan. It's a different flavor. It's not that it's wrong at all. In fact, it's quite right. It's just perfect. It's just a different perspective. Different perspective. So there in Ayodhya, and in general in the Vaikuntha realm, the perspective, the underlying mood is one of extreme respect. Extreme respect. And all the interactions are taking place in a very formal way. My dear Lord, I offer my obeisances to you. In Goloka Vrindavan, the mood's very different though. Informal. That, hey, you, Krishna, what are you doing, Krishna? Or sometimes we give the example that when Krishna's with the cowherd boys, the mood is friendly, very informal. They're just, you could say, buddies, just spending time together. Haribol. And Krishna and the cowherd boys, they often have sporting events because boys do things like this. They run around and jump around and just do things. This is the nature particularly of young boys. Very active. I saw advertised somewhere a set of t-shirts, one for the father and one for the son. Means, small son, small boy. And the one for the son said, I am never tired. And the one for the father said, I am always tired. Yes, I thought it was quite good. So yes, they have all these competitions. Sometimes running, even sometimes wrestling, sometimes swimming, sometimes throwing, and just like this. And because Krishna is so kind to his devotees, he always lets his devotees win. He just lets them. He can win so easily, totally easily, but he just lets them win. Yeah, so they feel good. So sometimes they all get together and they have team games. One boy becomes the head of one team, another boy is the head of a second team, and oh, they're going to do some sort of team activity, competitive team activity. Maybe they're going to have like a relay race or whatever it might be. So the two boys take it in turns to choose who is going to be in their team. So one boy says, I'll take Shamananda Krishna. And the other boy says, I'll take Madhavi Prabhu. And the first boy says, I'll take Christian. And the next one says, I'll take Reggie. And so on and so forth. And nobody chooses Krishna. Because Krishna always loses. They think Krishna's a loser. So in the end, everyone has been chosen except Krishna. And the two leaders say to each other, they say, you want Krishna? No, you can have him. So, these things happen. And it's all very informal and just light-hearted. And it's unusual. It happens under certain circumstances sometimes. Sometimes Krishna shows very vividly his supremacy, his supreme nature. And then they realize, oh gosh, we must offer our obeisances. And they do sometimes. But then they get up and they look at Krishna again, look in his eyes, and that informal loving mood just comes back and they just forget about offering obeisances. Yeah, so but in Vaikuntha it's very different. No, even actually if you've read, and you should read if you haven't read, Brihad Bhagavatamrita, although I think you should really only read it after you've read Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita. But anyway, when you read it, you will come across the part. There are two sections. The book's divided into two quite distinct parts. In the second part is the story of Gopakumar going back to Godhead. So he's going back step by step. On the way he's stopping here, stopping there, different places on the way, in between. And one place he stops is Vaikuntha. He's on his way actually to Goloka Vrindavan, but he stops in Vaikuntha. And he meets Lord Narayan, who is very grand, extremely grand. You know, if you think Queen Elizabeth is grand, well, I don't know about that. But anyway, Lord Narayan in Vaikuntha, wow, is just a different dimension of grandness, completely. So Lord Narayan walks in to this big meeting, assembly hall type of thing, which is just total opulence and magnificence. The Lord comes in, all the various devotees are there, and Gopakumar. Gopakumar, as the name says, is a young cowherd boy. Gopa meaning cowherd boy, Kumar meaning young, means like sort of maybe 10-ish, yeah, something like that. So in comes the Lord, and everyone bows down and humbly offers obeisances, except Gopakumar. He just goes running forward, Gopal, Gopal, Gopal! And some of them jump up and grab him and tell him, don't do like that. Bow down, will you? Then you can offer some prayers in a very respectful Yeah. So it's not that either is wrong, it's just different flavors. Even in Goloka Vrindavan there are different flavors, of course. There's devotees in Shanta Rasa, a neutral type of relationship like the trees, the plants, the animals. Then there are those in a mood of servitude. We don't hear about them so much, but they're two famous servants in Goloka. What are their names? Tarika and something. They're two famous servants. There's also a Gopi Tarika. But anyway, they're those who are servants. And they're like cleaning the house, the palace of Nanda Maharaj, washing the clothes, that sort of thing. Then there are the friends we just mentioned, like the cowherd boys particularly. The cowherd boys, and interestingly enough, the gopis who have conjugal relationships with Lord Balaram. With Krishna, they have friendly relationships, like their cousin. Krishna's cousin, Kundalata, she's a gopi, she's one of the gopis, young gopi girls. But she has a conjugal relationship with Lord Balaram, and with Lord Krishna, it's kind of like sisterly, cousin, because they are cousins. And in that culture, cousins are considered brothers or sisters, yeah? They're referred to as such, and not like something different from biological brothers and sisters. So yeah, amongst those friends, there's this other type of mood we mentioned, very friendly, informal, relaxed. And even sometimes they chastise Krishna. And then there's the parents. And they're in a senior position and their consciousness is like that Krishna is our little boy and we must look after him. Because if we don't, he's going to get into big trouble. Because he's one of these wild little boys. Like my maternal grandfather, when his name was Norman, when he was a child, they told me, that was in the 1800 and somethings, there was a mantra. When he was a little boy, go and see what Norman is doing and stop him. That was the mantra. See what Norman is doing and stop him. Yeah, so that's the parental mood. We've got to look after. We've got to protect. We have to train and provide for and so on. Krishna. And then there's the gopis in the conjugal relationship. So you can't say that any of them are wrong at all, but they're definitely different. There are different flavors. So there are different sampradayas, and they have different flavors. Even, so like that. Like we are going in, what is it now? It's about 6 weeks or a little bit, 6 weeks then. We are going to South India. A whole group of us, maybe, I don't know, 150, 170 or something. And we are starting in Tirupati. Very, very famous and incredibly opulent temple. It's just extra dimensional. We were there when we first went there, actually with Madhya Prabhu. One day we went in and they told us that, look, the deity Balaji has a new crown. It's not exactly a crown, it's almost like a helmet. It's big, it's probably that high, and comes down over his ears. And they said, yeah, it's solid gold, encrusted with diamonds. It was made in America. And I asked, how much did it cost? They said, $7 million. And that's what it cost. So it's extremely opulent place. It's just sure. But that is part of the Sri Sampradaya. It's a different Sampradaya. Means they received the knowledge from the Lord, but via Lakshmi. Whereas we're in the Brahma Sampradaya, and we have received the knowledge from the Lord, but through Lord Brahma, and then Lord Chaitanya too. So you get these different sampradayas, and they have different flavors, but as long as everything's being maintained properly in authentic ways, even though they have different flavors, but you cannot say one of them is wrong and the other is right, because it's just not true. However, here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada refers to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the person who defined these Apasampradayas. Apasampradaya basically means like pretentious sampradaya, not authentic, some imagined type of ideas are there. Along with some ideas which are right, but there's also some prominent ideas which are wrong. And therefore they're called Apasampradayas. These 12. Aula Baula Kata Bhaja Neda Dharavesha Sani Sahajiya Saki Beki Smarta Jati Gosani Ativadi Chudadari and Gauranga Nagari. They all worship Lord Chaitanya. He is the deity. They're all followers of Lord Chaitanya. So, that's good. What can you say? That's good. But, somewhere between the time of Lord Chaitanya and now, some creatively minded people came along and invented in some cases, and in other cases, sort of, what's the term? They modified in certain ways, based on certain understandings they had, which was somewhat distorted. So they modified some of the teachings and modified some of the practices. And now you've got, it's sort of like a, what would you say? What's the term? Deformed form of what is ultimately a very bona fide and actually even the most important of all the sampradayas, the line coming from Lord Chaitanya. So I don't know, the specific deviations of all of them. Some of them I do. The Baulas, Baula actually means madman, mad person. Yeah, and even Aula also basically means something along those lines. But Baula is something little different. And Baula means madman. And you may have heard, the idea for this Baula line, subdivision of the line coming from Lord Chaitanya, the origin is Advaita Acharya. Because Advaita Acharya, when it came time for Lord Chaitanya to leave this world, Lord Chaitanya Advaita Acharya sent Lord Chaitanya a message basically telling him, listen, it's time to leave. Your mission is completed. You can leave this world now. And unfortunately, I don't have the actual verse here, although it's there. It's definitely there in Chaitanya Charitamrita. We could read the actual verse. Advaita Acharya, basically what he said is that in the marketplace, because the devotees used this term, Nama Hata, Nama meaning the holy names, Hata meaning market, marketplace. That's how one way they referred to sort of the organization they had for spreading Krishna consciousness, the marketplace of the holy names. So Advaita Acharya sent this message saying, in effect saying, that in the marketplace there is no more sale of rice. Rice, which in Bengali is chawla. 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 Yeah, there's no more sale of rice because everyone has got the rice. Yeah, everyone's got it now. There's no more sale of chawla, and everyone has become baula. Everyone has become mad in the Sankirtan movement. And then he said, there's actually 2 verses, that tell him, Lord, he sent this message through someone, tell him that this message has been sent by a baula, by a madman, who's Advaita Acharya. So they have taken this, and Lord Chaitanya, it's described, when he received this message, he became very grave. Because, Advaita Acharya was the one who called for Lord Chaitanya to come. Yeah. And we mentioned that the other night, didn't we? We were talking about the relationships of different devotees with Lord Chaitanya and Advaita Acharya. Lord Chaitanya kept offering respect to Advaita Acharya, and Advaita Acharya didn't like it. So he wanted Lord Chaitanya to chastise him, means accept him as a junior. Therefore he started preaching Mayavad. It was just a joke. But he wanted to make Lord Chaitanya angry. And he did. And Lord Chaitanya came and physically attacked him. And Advaita Acharya was extremely happy that now you're accepting me as a junior. Yeah. And Lord Chaitanya, as he was attacking Advaita Acharya, Lord Chaitanya said, I only came here, to the material world. I was happy in Goloka Vrindavan. Why would I come to this place? I only came because you asked me to. And now you're preaching this nonsense Mayavad. What are you doing? Yeah. So when Lord Chaitanya received that message, he became very grave. And he said, sometimes he calls the deity to come to be worshipped. And sometimes he sends the deity away. Yeah. Lord Chaitanya said. Meaning, he called me, now he's telling me it's time to go. Anyway, the point was about the madness. So these baulas, if you ever come across them in Bengal, they sort of carry on like crazy people. And they like to smoke dhaka, which helps with the madness, I guess. Because anything which enhances the madness is good. Because, yeah, you're meant to go mad. Chant Hare Krishna and just go mad. The Baulas, Karta Bhajas, I don't really know what they are. The Nadas also, the Dharaveshas. I think the Dharaveshas, they're the ones who dress in red. And you get husband and wife traveling together. Mr. and Mrs. Goswami. Yeah, they both say they're sannyasi. But they're together and they sort of, do things which men and women do when they're together. And then the Sani Sahajiyas, more commonly known as just the Sahajiyas or Prakrita Sahajiyas, meaning those who particularly, their idea is, Lord Chaitanya, he was teaching us to worship Radha and Krishna. That's nice. And sometimes he took the position of Radha. And sometimes he took the position of, he was in the position of Krishna. You and I, meaning the boyfriend and the girlfriend, we must take the roles of Radha and Krishna and imitate what we think are the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, meaning some sort of sexual relationship, although the relationship between Radha and Krishna is very different. But that's how they think it is. And we must carry on sexual activities as if we're Radha and Krishna, and chant Hare Krishna and be happy. This is Sahajiya. Imitation. Then Saki Beki is, Saki of course means the gopi, girlfriends. That's a Saki. And Saki Beki means you must dress as a gopi. So sometimes, if just as a very practical, down-to-earth example, if you go to Navadweep and you go and visit the temple of Vishnu Priya, where is Dharmeshwar Mahaprabhu, sometimes they dress Lord Chaitanya as a gopi. And in fact, every day, as I understand, the normal dressing, even if he's dressed as a male, he has a nose ring. In the center of the nose, he has a nose ring hanging down to acknowledge that Radharani. And sometimes you'll go in there, and not often actually, but it happens. You go in there, and there's the pujari offering the arati. It's sort of pretty much as we do, but he has a sari on. Haribol. And you get these elderly gentlemen, they're 60 years, 70 years old, offering arati with a sari on, and they're serious. Haribol. That is Saki Beki. Then Smarta means extremely attached to the rules and regulations. Extremely attached. Without appreciating the goals which are to be achieved through following the rules and regulations and trying to develop in terms of those goals, but simply regulations for the sake of regulation. Yeah, just to do it right. Of course, to do it wrong is not good, but just to be, a rules and regulations fanatic is another type of wrong extreme. And then the Jati Gosamis, they are very common. Of all of these, they are the most common actually. They are the most common. Jata means birth or by birth. It's derived from ja. Ja means to take birth, to appear, like Janma is also from Ja. So Jata means by birth, Goswami. By birth, you're a Goswami. Yeah. And it's just a family surname. It's just a family surname. It's, at least they've sort of adapted it like that. Shri Nitai Mayapur Chandra King. Yes. And in Vrindavan, the main temples, the main 7 temples, and many of the other ones, but particularly the main 7 ones, most prominent temples in Vrindavan, they are run by, manned and womaned by Jati Goswamis. Yes. You ask any of them, what's your name? Such and such Goswami. And this is my wife, such and such Goswami, or Goswamini or something. Which is a perversion. It's a perversion. Goswami means one who's controlled their senses, which among other things means not engaging in any form of sex life and various other things. And then there's the Ativadis, I don't know the details about them. Chudadharis also, I don't know. And finally the Gauranga Nagaris. They're an interesting group. They are fairly prominent in Bengal, West Bengal, quite prominent. Gauranga, of course, that's Lord Chaitanya. Nagari means now that enjoyer. Lord Chaitanya as the enjoyer means as Krishna. As Krishna enjoys with Radharani and the gopis, Lord Gauranga enjoys in the same way with, first of all, his wife, or two wives were there. First of all with them, but then, where it becomes a little more sort of extreme, then with his associates, who in Vrindavan, in Krishna Lila, who are also in Vrindavan Lila, Krishna Lila, with his associates who are gopis. Although now they're in male forms. Not all, but so many were in male forms. And we have been a number of times now to a place named Srikanda, north of Navadvip. A nice place. I mean, basically, in many ways, it's a nice place. And it's the place of Narahari Saka Thakur and a few other of Lord Chaitanya's close personal associates, some of whom are in Krishna Lila also, and are gopis. Particularly Narahari Saka Thakur is a gopi. So there's a place just outside, sort of on the edge of the village, called Dharadanga, where Lord Chaitanya had different pastimes when he came to that place. And there, in the center, is a raised building. It's not big, but it's sort of, I don't know, 2 to 3 stories high, maybe 2 to 3. And in the top is a small room. I mean, it's like 3 meters across. Small room on the top. And that is the room where they bring, there's a special deity of Lord Gauranga from those days, 500 years ago. And they bring that deity there during the festival around the time of when Lord Chaitanya visited there. And they say that Narahari Saka Thakur comes in his gopi form and has pastimes there with Lord Chaitanya, who's now in the mood of Nagari. He's in the mood of enjoyer, not in the mood of being a devotee, but in the mood of being the Lord as Krishna and enjoying with the female, the gopi associates. And it's all a bit bizarre. Haribol, what can you say? Except Haribol and Hare Krishna. And just an interesting little detail. There's another place which actually, offhand I forget the name. But anyway, there's another place south of Navadvip town. And that's where Bipin Bihari Goswami, who was the initiating spiritual master of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that's his place. His family was there. That's where Bhaktivinoda Thakur received initiation from Bipin Bihari Goswami. And they are Gauranga Nagari, active, practicing Gauranga Nagaris. So they're all attached to Lord Chaitanya, but there are these twists, quite serious twists, which kind of undercut the value of their being very attached, actually, to Lord Chaitanya, because they're very attached to Lord Chaitanya. Yeah, and in this way, corruption enters the mind through concoction and twisting teachings and personal motivation, all these types of things. And therefore Lord Chaitanya, when all the devotees headed by Srivas Thakur were glorifying Lord Chaitanya warned them, what kind of chanting is this? Are you leaving aside the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, meaning Lord Krishna? And generally, Lord Chaitanya, if anyone tried to glorify him, generally he'd block his ears and say, Vishnu, 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 and go. Only on a few occasions did he accept it. Yeah, only on a few occasions. The Mahaprakash Leela, he accepted it. The devotees glorified him. And he called the devotees one by one and explained how they had been associated with him in his previous appearances, and so on. So that otherwise, Lord Chaitanya himself indicates herein that all such attempts would simply spoil the spirit of his cult, his tradition. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki. Any comment or question? Lady Prabhupada? Yes.
I was just wondering, I heard a lecture by this owner, Takuswami. He was relating that he was at a temple, the arti was going on, and a lady was offering the arti, and then when she turned, you saw the lady had a beard. So, that's obviously one of the things.
Saki Beki, probably, yeah. Yeah.
We were in, it was either Nandagram or Barshana, and there was some kind of festival going on, and there were also these men dancing, wearing saris, kind of things. So,
Yeah. It's going on, unfortunately.
yeah.
Yes.
Raj, it was so nice for explaining the different deviations that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had to deal with. In the light of that, can you say something about Srila Prabhupada told us we shouldn't change anything?
Well, yes. There's a danger of the same thing happening in ISKCON, and let's be frank, it has happened. Yeah, it's definitely happened in different ways. So that's why it's so important to, first of all, we have to understand the teachings of Srila Prabhupada. That is, that's a serious job to understand. And then we have to understand not just the teachings in a sort of academic sense like memorizing, but we have to understand the spirit. Without the two, you end up becoming like some version of smarta, some version. And without, having the knowledge, if you're just all in spirit and mood and like that, then you'll tend to become some type of sahajya, some variation on the theme. Because sahajya as a word, sahajya means, or can be translated as one who takes things cheaply. Yeah. So it's a subtle thing, it's a somewhat subtle thing. And one devotee has done a whole study, it's very interesting, of what happens not just in our Sampradaya or ISKCON, but what happens often in religious traditions. After the founder has departed, and I'd have to refer to my notes to really get it all right, but when the founder is present, I'd have to look at my notes actually. The intention is clear because he's there. And he can just say, this is the intention. But after he's departed, the next generation means disciples of Prabhupada. The intention can become lost. Generally, if anything is going to become lost, it's the intentions. And then in the generation after, the disciples of the founder, can you remember? I can't remember, I don't have the information here. But it's a whole seminar we've done, actually. It's a whole seminar we've done for a couple of days about something else is lost, and then something else is lost. So there are 4 generations.
The last one is it becomes a political contrivance or something, isn't it? The last one?
Well, I don't know, but certainly politics becomes prominent becomes more prominent as time goes on. Yes, Prabhu.
Sorry, I have lots of questions, but I'm only going to ask one.
We don't have much time.
It says, this is something that's been bothering me for a while. At this position, a yogi can think of a plant. This is Adi Leela 22, chapter 5. Can think of a planet which he wants to go to after leaving the body. You mentioned about Kunta planets, etc. He can then decide whether he wants to go to the abode of Krishna in the transcendental world of Kuntas, from which he will not be required to descend to the material world, or to travel to higher planets. Perfect yogi is limited to either. For the perfect yogi who has attained success in the method of leaving his body in perfect consciousness, transferring from one planet to another is as easy as walking to a grocery store. It describes how the yogi takes the life air and concentrates between his eyebrows. He simply has to desire to leave the material world and find a grosser forms, move the vital force to the topmost part of the skull, and leave the body from the whole of the skull called the Brahma Randra. This is easy for one in the practice of yoga. Now, we don't, as far as I understand in any fashion, get taught how to manipulate our ki or our life air or anything on those lines, although a number of us have done various meditations. It also says in Uddhava Gita in 11th canto that Krishna goes through a process where one grows the lotus flower, blossoms it in the heart, and after a month of doing this meditation one can abandon it because you will have mastered the life air. So my question is really, who is training us to do these things, which is Prabhupada saying critical at the time of death? How does one get that knowledge?
You see, this is basically sort of a type of bottom line. This is for different yugas. It's not for now. It's not for now. Now, Harinam eva kevalam. The chanting of the holy names is the only way. And if people try and do these things, like in the Bhagavatam itself, who is it? Aditi does the Paya, what's it called? Payavrata, is it? Something like that. Some particular, like, what would you say? It's a sort of ritualistic type of process with some sort of yogic type things involved. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears to her after, I think it's a month or something along those lines. Different people, different yoga. We're not on that sort of level where we can take up such procedures and become successful in them. People can try. Of course, people can try and do anything. But we're not on that level. Therefore, Harinam eva kevalam. Yes.
If I can just elaborate, from a personal perspective, when I'm chanting, the first thing I do is I open my chakras, move my energy around a bit, start with the lotus flower, etc. as a visualization. And I find it enhances the chanting. And why would Prabhupada give us this information, and why would it be in the Uddhava Gita, which is designed for Kali Yuga, being the Srimad Bhagavatam?
It's not designed for Kali. The Bhagavatam's not designed for Kali Yuga. It's eternal. So it's relevant to certain people at certain times. This is why we have acharyas like Prabhupada to help us to know what to do right now. But like the Bhagavatam says, Dharmas anustita pumsam vishvaksena katasu yad notpada yad yati ratim shrama eva hi kevalam. Any activity which doesn't help you develop an attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead is simply a waste of time. Yeah. So therefore, in the Vedic literatures, all sorts of things are presented for all sorts of different types of people. In Bhagavad Gita and to some degree in the Bhagavatam, these other types of things are also referred to, mentioned a bit. But the emphasis always in the Vaishnava literatures is on pure devotional service. Pure devotional service, nothing else. Shrama. Shrama means waste of time. Eva means definitely. He means certainly. Kevalam means only. Yeah. Shrama, Eva, he, Kevalam. Only. I mean, certainly, definitely, only a waste of time. And it's a very serious matter, actually. It's so emphatic. It's so emphatic, you could hardly be more emphatic without, using bad language or something like that. Yeah. And, you were talking about chakras with your own, whatever you're doing, practice, where you're practicing. You'll find this type of thing is often referred to as Yoga Mishra Bhakti. It's Bhakti because you're trying to chant the holy names, it's for chanting the holy names. But one is thinking that my chanting of the holy names can be improved by adding some sort of yogic type practice. Whereas it's considered to be on like a type of anatha, actually. Because really one should just try to cultivate the chanting of the holy names and absorb oneself in chanting properly and hearing properly the holy names.
Sorry, when your mind opens, while chanting, and this happens a lot to me. Like my mind will open and I'll start seeing things. I have a vivid imagination, or whatever you want to call it. So then it only makes sense to focus it on the Lord or perform some of the Lord's instructions with
Okay.
that.
Well, it's
From my
interesting.
perspective, I don't know.
It's interesting you use the word imagination. We definitely have to be very careful of the imagination. But the point is, Haryanam Eva Kevalam. The actual thing to do is chant the holy names, and we shouldn't really worry about or involve ourselves in anything other than chanting, the actual chanting of the sound vibration and the hearing of the sound vibration. Sometimes, under certain circumstances, some devotees have felt and, do feel perhaps, that doing some other thing helps my chanting. And it may even, at that particular point in their development, it may appear to. But after some time, it shows itself as being anatha, something which actually really is holding one back, rather than helping. For example, it's in the 14th chapter of Nectar of Devotion. There's the discussion of renunciation and knowledge, in not just knowledge in the Krishna conscious sense, but knowledge in the specific sense of separating ourselves from from the body. And there it says that those Jnana and Vairagya, in Sanskrit, Jnana and Vairagya, on a certain very beginning level, they may appear to help to some degree, but after some point, they should be left behind, because they become a distraction from pure bhakti. So the point is, the bottom line is that right now, wherever we're at, if we're in a very early stage or not so early or whatever, actually what we should do, whatever the stage, even if it's our first day of contact with Krishna consciousness, try to work on pure, unadulterated bhakti, with only performing only those activities which are actually pure, unalloyed bhakti, and trying our best to avoid, what to speak of concocted ideas or imagined ideas, but even trying to avoid bona fide but secondary ideas. And I'm afraid that's all I've got time for. I have to go. Yeah, I actually have to go right now. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Chaitanya Tharma ki Jai.